we're going to focus on here is the secure wireless networking. We're going to talk about the details of different types of wireless technologies that you should be familiar with for the exam. One of the things that we've seen and continue to, they expand on these simulations. And what we mean by that is maybe, for example, they'd give you a wireless network, and then you'd have to actually go in and configure the router, the wireless router, in order to make sure that everybody's on the same subnet, make sure that you have the same subnet mask, everything is configured appropriately. And sometimes maybe they don't have the proper encryption set up on them, so you have to go in there and make a modification to those as well. So as we go through this, we're going to talk a little bit about the technical details of Wi-Fi, what it is that you should be aware of, be familiar with the IEEE standards associated with them, and so forth. Okay, so if you have ever worked with wireless networks, you know that there are different frequencies allocated based on a lot of different things. Most of the time it's which frequency ranges are available for commercial use, okay? And so we're going to talk a little bit at the end about the different organizations that allow you to identify which frequencies are used. And actually, if you've ever gone out on the internet, you can actually take a look at all of the frequencies that have been identified and allocated throughout the country. The FCC is who monitors and maintains those frequency allocation tables. Okay. So for the 802.11 standards, so IEEE has a number of 802 standards or 800 series standards. 802.3 you should be familiar with. That's the one for Ethernet. 802.11 is the one for Wi-Fi and the specifications for that. And the frequencies that we're going to become most familiar with, mostly 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But just also be familiar that 3.6 and 60 gigahertz and a lot of these other ones are starting to matriculate now through as well. Okay. Also, just for a little bit of historical, background, recognize that we went from kind of an analog type of system, and then we started matriculating into the 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G standards. Okay. It's not important for the exam to know what those standards do. Just recognize that those are available in terms of cellular capability. Okay, everybody familiar with the difference between a line of sight type of technology and non-line of sight? It essentially just means that if you can get to between where you are and where something else is, and you're in between buildings and so forth, you don't have to have direct line in order to communicate with it. All right. Infrared, for example, though, doesn't operate in that way. It has to have a direct line of sight to it. Otherwise, if it hits other properties or other obstacles, then it's not going to be able to get through as effectively. All right. Memorize this table. Okay. Now we're gonna move on to the next thing, the next slide. But why it's important is if you're given a specific scenario, or if you're given one of the scenario-based questions, you should be able to mix and match the types of frequencies, the bandwidths, and the different types of ranges associated with each protocol. Okay, the 802.11 standard is made up of a wide number of protocol types. It starts with A, it goes all the way down to, triple Z or something like that. There's a lot of them. Okay, but the ones that I've highlighted here are the ones that you're going to need to be most familiar with relative to Wi-Fi. Okay. Another couple of things to consider is the fact for the more improved standards like 802.11.I and 11.N, just be aware that there's the more modern ones. The previous ones are what I would call the really how we started in terms of Wi-Fi and so forth. But there's a lot of improvements in each one of those protocols. And then just for inclusion and completeness, I've added in there the Bluetooth wireless information as well.